Adam, we've talked about this many different times, about early on with commissioning or different components. And one of the areas that, keeps on coming back is like early on design charrettes. And I was wondering if you could go into what are your thoughts about that?
Design charrette, you got me triggered now. So in North America, the early design meeting, the brainstorming meeting is called a design charrette. That's a French word, which comes from architects used to carry a trolley along, and that was called a charrette. Anyway, I only found that out recently because I have a French Lebanese friend who explained the word to me and how I was horribly mispronouncing it. But in the UK and other parts of the world, they don't have design charrettes. They just call them design brainstorm meetings. Either way, every design charrette I've ever been to goes like this. Everyone gets in a room. It's the early days of the job. No one's fallen out. No one's angry. Everyone's hugging. It's a big group hug. Everyone gets up and makes a statement about how green this job's going to be and how wonderful it's going to be. And then we talk about all the green technologies we could apply on a job. And then we put a rooftop unit on it because it's the cheapest thing going. So if every design charrette ends with a rooftop unit and the cheapest thing, this is my conclusion from that. What is the point of the design charrette when the market, the supply chain delivers the cheapest thing, and that is always the thing you choose because it's cheap, right? So it's enjoyable. It's the group hug. We're all good. But at the end of the day, if we're just putting rooftop units on, what is the point of that? Now, how would I do a design charrette? Because I know you're a big fan of lessons learned, and so am I. I would make that meeting a bit different. I would say, there are no rooftop units. What are we going to do? And I have a very straight conversation with a client in that first meeting. So, because they normally go, I want to do a LEED Platinum, I want to do the most sustainable thing. Then when they're faced with a cost, that all goes out the window. Yeah. So I would, first things first in that meeting, we would have a very straightforward conversation with a client about, are you really committed to the green? Because this is what it means, right? Then we would talk about lessons learned, what worked and didn't work on other jobs, because that's the most powerful thing no one ever talks about in a design charrette. Yeah. I tried to bring that up in the last two, and they said, oh, we ain't got time for that. Because everyone was still group hugging and talking about, fucking windmills and unicorns and rainbows. So
is this before the OPR or the OPR, or are we building the OPR?
So my first question in every design charrette is, where's the OPR? And when I get a load of blank, dead mackerel eye stares back at me, I call it the design brief. And they go, oh yeah, we got one of them, and it's about half a page long. It says, like, give me a green building. So I try and make it an OPR workshop with a lessons learned thrown in. If I can do that, I feel I've had a good meeting. But 80% of them just end in a group hug followed by a rooftop unit purchase.
So isn't it interesting that basically, the whole RFQ, RFP process, before we even get here, the reason why people win is because they basically told about how good they are from the other buildings that they've learned their lessons on. You ever wonder that? Like, so it's just, I almost like, did you? I almost want to say an RFQ should be like, who has more lessons learned, because I want to see who screwed up more to basically who's going to not screw up again. But why is it every building seems to be repeating every single thing wrong again and again? What's your thought on that?
Well, actually, I blame the owners for this, right? Because most owners really, they don't think this, and they don't think this is what they're saying. This is what they're saying. They're saying, I want the greenest possible building you've ever built. But I want to pay the same way I paid for the last piece of shit I built that wasn't green, right? And those are just not compatible objectives, right? If you want a high performance car like a Porsche, I do like me a Porsche, you accept there is a price premium for that. I don't expect to buy a Porsche for the price of a Skoda, right?
To your point, exactly, like an EUI, it's almost like basically, every reduction, how much is it going to cost, right? I tell people all the time, okay, so you're going to do an energy model, right? And this is, I'm writing a paper on this, right? Basically, I'm going to say it, energy modeling informs and commissioning confirms.
Yes.
And I put my hands like this because they're railroad tracks, right? Yeah. So one, you're going to say what you're going to do. And then two, if you don't have commissioning on the job, that train will fall off the track. If commissioning stays on it during the whole thing, actually through, right, into turnover, into occupancy, into post-occupancy, and imagine this, how many people have said, that EUI went from a 35 to a 90. You're like, did you have commissioning? Did you follow it? Did you have ongoing commissioning? Did you have monitoring base? Did you have FPT? They're like, no. I go, so you didn't basically follow the track, did you? They're like, no. I'm like, dude, did you ever come back and actually look at the spaces in the model and you're going to say, are they the same as they weren't? So the reason why I'm bringing this up with the design charrette to the end is always start with the end in mind, but everybody doesn't, because basically the last thing I'm going to say here is, when people say value engineering, right? They value engineer everything. There's another part to that. If everybody looks this up, it's called value analysis.
Yeah.
People never look up value analysis. That's supposed to happen before value engineering. People just cut everything out. Like you just said, they cut out the good units, they cut out the controls, the T-stats with everything else, and they just cut out the controls, and then you get that.
Look, yeah. Just to wrap this up, the design charrette in that meeting, part of the agenda should be the OPR design brief, cost and lessons learned have to be in that meeting, right?
What about how you keep it? Another question is once you agreed on that, how do you keep the train on the tracks? How do you make sure that, and remember this big one, how do you, not guarantee, because no one's going to guarantee, how do you assure that you're going to have that plus or minus 10% of that EUI? How do we do that?
Yeah, well, I try to get as an outcome from that meeting some KPIs, like we want an EUI of this, a WI, a water use intensity of this, and then track it, right? Mostly what comes out of those meetings is, we're doing lead silver or lead gold, right? Which is, who cares? That's not even braggable, by the way, if you listen to this. Bragging begins at lead platinum right now, in my opinion. Net zero is probably where bragging really starts. But that's another whole chat show about what the definition of that is. Don't get me going on that.
Living Building Challenge pedals.
Yeah. But, it is a useful meeting, but it's frequently just a group hug and an excuse for a day out. And that's where I have a problem with it, right? Let's be straight. There's not a lot of connection between design and construction and then operation, right? Because if you're just in the design and construction mode, which most people we work with are, it's all first cost issues. Whereas if you're in the P3 or PPP mode, where you're looking at the whole life cycle, that's a whole different level of value analysis, right? And linking the life cycle of building to the design decisions is the key here. And that's something else that has to come in to that meeting. But if it's a speculative developer, good luck with that. It's not happening. So, to be positive here, anyone who's doing design charrette, add in OPR as an agenda item, lessons learned as an agenda item, cost versus first cost versus operational costs, right? And come out of it with some KPIs that you're going to actually verify and measure at the end, right? Then that becomes a useful meeting.